Oh my God, you'd be shocked. It's unbelievable how many different. I mean, we watch them all. Like whenever we go, there's a DFB food guide that literally does a video a day of events. There's DSNY. There's this guy paging Mr. Morrow, which is just this somewhat autistic, just happy guy. You know, your typical fat guy who's bald, who's got a fedora that walks around. He's divorced. I mean, he lets you into his whole life, but literally will go to Disney some park every day, and he'll either do a park, he'll do Universal, but they're all predominantly Disney. There's this guy Tim Tracker that makes several $100,000 a year from his podcasts and is on like every Disney. So if they do a media day, these guys are all considered media now. Mm-hmm. So they all did the Star Wars hotel for free, which is, $6,000 supposedly for 2 days. And Disney brings them all in for 2 days just to get it. So they go back on their podcast and tell everybody about it. So there's some major influencers, and those are just the ones that we watch. So I'm sure there's plenty more. These are just the ones that we have gotten, they're amazing quality. I mean, the DFP one is they're based. She does say enough where, and I want to contact her because she's based out of Dallas, and she did a video last week where the person in front of her had a TCU hat on. So I'm guessing it's got to be her that's got some kind of TCU affiliation. Mm-hmm. So I was just like, oh, I need to get the frogs. Maybe she'll just, because she employs people too, because literally she's out of Dallas and she goes to Disney quite a bit, but they have somebody in the park doing a research on any new item, like, all the different festivals that they do. They're constantly there. So yes, there's a lot of them do that. And it's amazing the quality at which it's done. So it speaks to volumes of technology that is just for anybody.
Yeah. And in that case, how would you, we're talking about your retirement gig here. How do you break into that? How do you become something that they're going to want? Like, is that market saturated, or is there always a place for another guy doing Disney stuff?
Oh, and first of all, I laugh and I say, okay, because that's just going to be, I'm going to need to do something. And at least if she's down there, I think there's always something. And again, we're talking 10 years down the road, these guys will be out of it or, busy. So yeah, I think there's always something to get, but it takes, and it goes to the volume of, to do the podcast, how it's a formula. A lot of the things that the people do that, like you always say, put it in the comment. They all say the same thing to get the interaction with their users, with their watchers.
Yeah. That makes sense. We'll get you practicing for that.
Exactly.
Hey, Ed.
Good morning, guys. How are you?
Good morning.
Welcome.
Hi. How are you?
Doing okay. We got our Thursday morning, which is often slow because of our ladies' league. It's kind of our ladies' league morning, whereas tennis guys, we're used to if you work 7 days a week, no matter what's going on, you pretty much have Thursday morning off. So that's why we target Thursdays for conversations like this.
Well, I'm here. The Thursday morning is my day off with court, so I'm happy to be here and join you guys.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We're just as what's the word? I was gonna say informal, so to speak, as you and I were, where it made sense, it was consistent, it flowed well, we could hear each other, we had good professional conversation, but we can edit out anything we need.
Thanks.
We are live on YouTube just for posterity. We don't have any followers yet. That's not a thing. Someday we might, which means this unedited version either is going to be a paid content because there might be an F-bomb or two that we edit out of the of the podcast that goes out for the public consumption, or we have to go and delete some old stuff. But just so you're aware of that, and we record, and I don't think you know Bobby Schindler. I don't know if you guys have heard of each other or if you know each other, but Ed Shanaphy, Bobby Schindler.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Bob.
Bobby is our, I'd say co-host, but he's my business partner in a couple of different things now.
That's great.
We'll talk to you. I think I caught you up, Ed, on how Tennis for Children operates, and Bobby was one of our first proponents, positive advocates of the concept. And he's also done some facility management in different ways in the Atlanta area as well. So I thought we'd get the two of you together and hash out what you can either bring to Atlanta or bring to us, or whether it's ideas, because you operate mostly out of Florida and New England, so there's not a lot of business here in Atlanta. But we asked the questions to find out kind of what would bring you here to Atlanta, if that makes sense, or even if you would want to, how that works, how we might become friends and do business together.
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, Atlanta is such a great city, tennis city. It's known, across the country as being one of the best. Actually, my podcast, I interviewed two ladies, one of whom is in Charlotte, and that also is a similar city, I think, with those HOAs and so many courts on every corner. And down here in Florida, it's becoming like that. I live in an HOA too, and we just redid our 3 courts, and they've never been busier. People, even post-pandemic now, they are staying and hanging with tennis and golf. Obviously, involved in the club business more than just tennis. So golf is up, tennis is up, pickleball is through the roof across the nation, and I'm sure Atlanta is the same way. I want to stop in Atlanta on the way up. I'm driving up second week of May. I might be knocking on your door and saying hello, because I want to see it in person. I've only flown through that wonderful airport a few times, never been to Atlanta, so. I might stop this time, because I have a few new friends here, including you guys.
Fantastic.
That would be great, because we can let's find if you can leave a couple of days early.
Yep.
And actually show you around. One of the conversations we've had, I say multiple times, is how different the cultures are of different cities, different areas, as to how tennis operates, and how Florida is completely different from New England and completely different from Atlanta. And you got so many new apps and tech ideas and everything coming out of California or somewhere else that have no idea what's going on in Atlanta. And it was fun on your podcast, on the Beyond the Baselines podcast, to be able to talk about that and say, okay, well, Atlanta's just different, and hear some of the ways from our points of view as to how it's different, and then how that affects the relationship with somebody coming out of Florida. We like to hire the other person coming in from another state. Some of our country clubs do that. We're like, oh, we're bringing somebody from Arizona. Like,
right.
They don't know what Alta is. Like, there's such a unique learning curve here, and maybe Nashville has its own unique learning curve, and maybe every place really does. But I don't know which places are similar and which places are unique. But from Atlanta, we obviously think we're special.
Well, the clubs are different too. I specialize with clubs and boutique hotels, and each club has a different vibe. And some clubs, I call them, Atlanta, let's take Atlanta, for example, because that's where you guys are specialists. I would think those are basically year-round clubs. You've got the weather. You don't really have to go indoors, so you've got the weather year-round. And I think those people who are in Atlanta tend to stay in Atlanta. Now, I run clubs in Massachusetts where we see people from 8 weeks and, as little as 2 weeks. They'll come use the club every day for 2 weeks, and then they're gone for the rest of the year. I call that a destination club, like Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket. Those people come in for the longest they're really there for is the 8 weeks that the kids are out of school. The moms will come up with the three kids. Dad will travel back and forth from Boston, New York, or Chicago, or something like that, and come in on the weekends. But then I've got a club in Princeton, New Jersey, which is tennis, squash, and paddle, and a little pickle. And it's different because that season is year-round. We got an indoor tennis court, so it's a year-round situation there. Two squash courts, and obviously squash is indoors, so it's a year-round club. But those people go on vacation to they all go to Long Island, and they all here's the difference here is April, May is our busiest months there, and then June, kids get out of school, and that club gets quiet again. So you have to gear up earlier, and mentally, for me, I have to start ordering clothes back in January, because I got to have them on the rack by the end of March. They just going on the rack this week. Whereas with Massachusetts clubs, we can order in February or March, and they don't go on the rack until June 15th. And I can, even with instructors, and I know there's a labor shortage, right? And this is the toughest I've ever seen it. So that, like, if I'm doing, graduate students or foreign students from college, they have to go get their CPTs and their OPTs to work for the summer. With New Jersey, you got to start that process in December because they got to be teaching on the court April 1. I don't have to start that process going until March. So you've got a different timing element. Whereas Atlanta, I think you guys are really well positioned to be year round because it's a temperate zone. You think about Florida, a lot of people, starting this week. I mean, I call it the light switch. Easter Monday, boom, it goes off. And we lose 65, 70% of our clientele the week after Easter. They all start going north. And the grandparents start, hey, you got to go open up the house for the grandkids up there in Maine or wherever they're going. So Florida too is seasonal. Whereas I think Atlanta, you're not. You're like year round. It's kind of like Charlotte. I think that's why that inner, like Dallas, you think of these huge clubs in Dallas. Like a friend of mine, Chris Gale, is at River Oaks. Those huge jobs, a pro just from Chevy Chase Club went down to a huge job in Dallas. That band is year round. So it's a different feel for the clubs, different feel for the game of tennis too.
Well, and that's where I wanted to, sick Bobby on you, because Bobby's got a bunch of questions. I was telling him what you do and as much as I can understand about how you operate, and Bobby's just firing at me like question after question, like how does that work and how is that, how do we bring that to Atlanta? Does that even work in Atlanta? So I wanted to get you and Bobby together and have Bobby kind of fire at you and say, all right, how do we get that here? Does it help? And where do we go from there? Like Bobby's a little more in tune with how the clubs operate here in Atlanta than I am, because I'm a vendor to everybody. I've got my own niche, but he's been at the level of being able to manage clubs and understand what that takes. Is it? And I know I'm going to ask the obvious question because I know the answer. Is it really that different here, Bobby?
Is it? Yeah. Well, I think you nailed it. Even though we have peaks and valleys, it is. You make the majority of your money 4 months out of the year. The bad part is, even though it's you can't leave the other 8 months because then you would lose so much of the 4 months. So I think my biggest curiosity is first, where you're located in Florida.
I live in Vero Beach, Beach, Florida.
So East Coast.
Yep. Grew up in New York State. So I, grew up in New York State, moved to England for 20 years.
Okay. So where in New York State?
I grew up in a little corner of Westchester County. Really, people don't know about it. It's called South Salem. It's a little hamlet of the town of Lewisboro. It's basically dirt roads and horses. I mean, my next door neighbor was the Olympic horse, equestrian gold medalist, Buddy Brown, and just all dirt roads, not much out there except farms and horses. But it's this little neck of Westchester County that apparently was traded back in the days to Connecticut. Or Connecticut gave some property and New York State took this property. I don't know how it worked back in the colonial days, but very quiet little place. Grew up playing tennis at Wacabuck Country Club. It's all, Native American names up there.
The reservations.
A bunch of word pound reservation. Yep. And, and the big reservations with the gambling are up there now, Mohican Sun and Foxwoods and all that. But, Wacabuck had 6 courts. It's still there with 6 courts, and the director of tennis there has grown a great program, and he's one of my associates with Beyond the Baselines. Wonderful guy, Harry Gilbert, and he's really taught me a lot in the last 6 months as we've teamed up to run a couple clubs. And as you say, I've got an experience in New York, in Florida, and then New Jersey. And I'm trying to find some experiences in your neck of the woods, because it is a year-round thing. You guys are so good, Sean, you're so good at the kid stuff, and that is, again, I see a kid, like if we're up in Marion, Mass, where one of my clubs is, if I see a kid up there, I'll see that kid for six weeks max, maybe 8 weeks max. You guys have the beautiful thing of having that kid, the whole school year. And we have that in Princeton, with the indoor courts, and it's a different paradigm. It's great. It's tough to say goodbye to your kids after 6 or 8 weeks, because that they may not improve over the winter, and you just made all that advancement.
Sure. Well, interesting. I guess the biggest curiosity initially I have right away is, and you've alluded to them with it. So when they bring you in, you obviously do more than just you manage the facility? Because I'm hearing that you're doing pro shop purchasing. You're establishing the program. So give us a little feel for if we're a seasonal club in New York, Massachusetts, what do they bring you in to do?
Okay, so the different levels. Obviously, we can manage the whole club, which is what we basically do in Massachusetts and in Princeton. Princeton, we have squash, paddle, pickle, tennis. Right. We do all the hiring of all the instructors, all the liability insurance, all the payroll. We do all that payroll. So all the instructors are on our company's payroll. Same in Massachusetts. We have 11 instructors up there, all on our payroll. And then what we have is a back end. So imagine if in several clubs, a lot of clubs do this for several reasons. One is, a governing board of a club, those governors don't always have time to run a business. A club is a business, and we have to remember that. Clubs members think of it as their haven, their getaway, their escape. It's a business. If it doesn't make money, it's going to disappear. And I've seen clubs almost at the brink of disappearing. Actually, I visited one in New Jersey a couple of weeks back. I won't say which one, but fortunately, it's been taken out of from the bank. The loan's been taken back, but clubs can go out of business. So what we specialize is growing the revenue, making great programming through great programming, marketing the club as a wonderful place so that your wait list gets bigger. That's the most important thing, is that the pathway to new members. If you don't have a great program, you're not going to get new members. People don't want to join a bad program. And then also we look at, we run all the shops, the tennis shops. So I buy for 4 or 5 clubs now. So it's a nice central way of, hey, we've already got accounts with, Lululemon, Sophie Bella, Tory Burch, all those lines, with bags too, tote bags, all those accessories. So we can go and buy in volume and then put it across 5 or 6 other clubs. And that helps too. I mean, we're not a Sam's Club, but we have a little bit of a better leverage with that kind of volume. So those kinds of things we do. We will come in and run the whole club. And then we also go into clubs that'll say, hey, Ed, we need a new director. And so we could be the interim director for a while we run a search, go out through our contacts, go out through our email databases, try to, do a search. So an executive search for either a director of a department like tennis, squash, racket sports. We don't really get involved in food and beverage if we don't have to. I don't like that business that much. It's too quick to be too easy to turn a plate bag rather than, pick up tennis balls.
Absolutely.
But we've done that. And then we've also consult. So for example, we just finished with a club up in near Boston in Worcester, Mass, where they did their own search, but we basically led them down the primrose path. We didn't conduct the search, but they paid us an hourly fee for helping them set up the search. We did their offer letter for them. We did, we did the job description. We tweaked it, things like that. We've done long-term strategic plans for clubs. A club will come to us and say, "Hey, Ed, we want to put in a pickleball facility. Can you do a feasibility study on that?" So we went, looked at the zoning laws, looked at the cost of doing a 2-bank court situation facility, a 4-bank court, 4-court bank facility with a social area, because pickleball tends to be more social than tennis. We've done feasibility studies for that. We've done feasibility studies for indoor tennis courts, squash courts. So we specialize on the racket side of the club facility business, but we have different tiers, different levels, and we're expanding our team too, which is kind of fun. Just hired a new business manager, and she's from New York. And for example, something that came up that we were unaware of is in some states, independent contractors have to have workers' compensation. I didn't know that. So, something new there. So we found, and she went out, and that was her job. That was her task. And we found that, there's certain companies that will, provide workers' compensation policies for independent contractors working on your club property. So those are things that we do. We're just, we can be anything from management consultant to Mr. Fix-It for clubs.
So you say how many people are involved on the management or corporate side of it, as opposed to obviously how many contractors you do grow to during the seasons?
Well, I'll go through. We have, my wife and I started the business. She does most of the public relations side of it, and the marketing and the Hootsuite, those things that push out your social media. She does a lot of that. And then we hired a woman who I used to run a big ad agency in London. So I hired one of the great women I had working over there, who now lives in London, but is from Czech Republic. And she does all our social media, all our Canva designs, all our, social media, public consumption for advertising. And then I have just hired a business manager, Lynn Darlington. She's looking at, for example, this is the toughest part, is that we operate in 4 or 5 states. So you have to have different profit centers in each state, right? So she's looking at how we can, in QuickBooks, keep our invoicing policies,
consistent.
but yeah, and then classify them by state, by club, by partner, and then look at those costs too. So, for example, if we do a bulk order of clothing for 5 clubs, she takes that bulk order and breaks it by club and by state, so that we have the cost of goods per facility, things like that. So that's a big task as we grow. So Lynn Darlington, so we really have, and then Harry Gilbert is is kind of my mentor in the business. He's the director of tennis at Walkabout, but in the winters he works basically for us. He's helped out a lot on a couple of big projects. He's a former president of USPTA national. He's coached at the top level and has put together for some great programs. So he and I go way back, and he came on board, which is fantastic. So he's one of our main associates. And then we have an HR specialist, Renee Mccarthy, who I met through another country club. So she is, talked to every week, basically, if we have an HR question, like workers' comp for independent contractors. And then who else do we have on the team? We have Yitka Gavdanova, who is a wonderful instructor who goes and will help out when needed at a club. Like we'll just slot her in. And so, yeah, we have a bunch of people. We have a nice team, and we have a couple other people who work as interim GMs or interim, how can I say it, desk managers, front desk. Right. Carrie Warwick Young, who went up to Princeton and ran that club for 3 months. Just got up from Vero. She's in our Vero office here. So yeah, we have a great team. And on the contractor side, obviously that's constant. It's a constant change. We're trying to find instructors for different locales and different sports. Right now I'm looking for a director of squash. So if anyone out there is thinking they want to become a director of squash, please call me. But yeah, those are the things that that's the real the wheel that just keeps moving. And it's great to have a long-term head pro or lead pro, but that's not always the case. It's, people move, families move, businesses change.
How many facilities do you run during the summer?
Right now, we'll be running 2 full, managing 2 facilities over the summer. Okay. And in the winter, we do a major management consultancy for a club here in Vero Beach at the Boulevard. We help them out. We did all their HR, their employee and contractor handbooks, their compensation, workers' comp, vacation policies, liability. So we're not managing that one, but we're kind of like their back end. And then what we've done at a couple of other clubs is basically gone in and helped basically at the beginning of the season with their program, with their calendar. Like, hey guys, what can you add here? And what can, how do you, I think one of the most important things, and this comes back to the question of Atlanta and year round, is how do you, build a calendar so that people don't get burnt out? I think it's really important for a destination club where you have just 10 weeks. You got to give them some breathing space. You can't have like cardio on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and then do a massive cardio party on Sunday. They're going to be burnt out by Sunday. So you got to, and in the year-round clubs, how do you keep the momentum going? Because I remember when I worked year-round, I got bored. People ask me how I do the seasonal thing. I'm like, I'm always seeing new people. I love meeting new people. Yes. It's hard to be year-round. You're teaching tennis to the same person every week. Sean, you do it with the kids. I asked you on my podcast, how do you keep it interesting? I applaud you guys because you do. And I find that difficult. That's hard. I find it much easier to go say, hey, I can change that swing in 2 weeks and then you'll never see me again.
Well, and I'll jump in with a shameless plug. It's one of the reasons I wrote my book, How Not to Play Tennis, which just is out on ebook as of today.
Is it? Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. But it's one of the reasons I wrote the book. And what I would tell people is tell the people taking tennis lessons on a weekly basis, I'm saying the same thing over and over again, and you still aren't listening. Or you don't get it, or you can't get it. Like, there's plenty of reasons why it doesn't work. But I wrote it down. Here you go. I wrote it down. Figure it out. So the weekly tennis lesson that we give, you don't have to keep it interesting. They're going to come back having forgotten what you told them last week. And with the kids, especially the same thing. It's so much repetition, especially at the beginner level. I mean, even if you get in the intermediate and the elite levels, you got the kids specifically that they need that stroke production. They need those reminders. They're building that in. And to be able to do that once a week as opposed to 5 days a week for 8 weeks straight, I think of that and I go, oh my gosh, is that not just the most repetitive thing you've done every day for 2 months? That's just what you do, and then you never do it again? So it's fun to have you ask, how do you do this year round, when for us, that's just how it's supposed to be, right, Bobby?
Well, but I completely agree with that. And it brings up a lot of different unique challenges, and a lot of challenges that a lot of the guys in the business, either they get out way too soon, or, because it's just, they see the money on the table, work way too much, burnout, and you just can't get that life, those hours back. So it is a challenge down here. You have to be realistic the way your approach is. You have to get to the point where you have other people working with you, so people do hear other voices. You have to say, unless you're looking for me to be a ball machine, and down here a lot of the pros are just that. We're glorified ball machines, because the players can't hit amongst themselves, or don't hit amongst themselves. So they'll go out and want to hit. So part of that is we've diminished our capacity as the wow factor, because we go out and we hit with them a lot, because that's what the market requires more than anything else. Like you, we do the majority of our work 2 seasons, spring and fall. Fall is our busiest season of the year. And then the rest of the year, you try to maintain. What we do, what I've emphasized since I've been in so we're interchangeable, is make it fun. When you walk up to buy clubs, there's, during a drill, there's music playing. It's loud. Yes, we're going to set the tone. There's a technical aspect, usually very little. If you ask a question, we'll address it, but it's more competitive, and with just, with some tactical thrown in, because you know what you get. You use that as your marketing. When people come to you for a private lesson, it's the great part about having 80,000 players in this league. In Alta, that's
unbelievable.
That if you get 5% who become fanatics, that's still a great number. Where most cities would be happy to have 5,000 tennis players, we have 5,000 fanatics. Now, you look at the professional tour level, the tournaments always come here thinking this is going to be great, and they walk out saying what happened, because they don't factor in that they're competing with more than just tennis. Tennis is the similarity, and kind of what we're trying to learn, and what we're doing outside of our on-court activities, is trying to figure out the role tennis plays within this culture, and how to expand and offer more things to people, like getaways, like go to different. I'm with you. Down here, most of the people go to Sandestin or Hilton Head. If you drew your circle, you're 6 hours away from Hilton Head. You're 6 hours away from Sandestin.
Those are your destination clubs, and
those
guys
are our destination.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think Disney could have done something with their tennis facility, because besides me, you can see in the background, being a huge Disney fanatic, most of the young parents, and that is our demographic, and our demographic really ideally is the 35-year-old mom who has kids, who gets into understand culturally, as you said about the HOA. Literally, subdivisions are built in Atlanta, necessitating at least 2 lighted tennis courts that have access to a bathroom, because that allows you to become certified to play Alta. So developers know this. So you go into a new subdivision, that's what you're going to see. And it's funny, because in the span, the city keeps going further north, because you do eventually run out of land. I was at a club we started, it was called White Columns, in the late 1990s. when we got there, our first round robin was done at night. I sent somebody out to get ice. 2 hours later, they came back pale white saying, there's nothing here. They got lost. And now if you go there, you're like, wow, this is 20 years ago, and that's not an issue anymore. So, the civilization is moving increasingly north, which is expanding the reach of tennis. But then you have instances where, how far will people drive? I mean, we go literally out to, when you say Atlanta, goes Peachtree City, which is where it's close to the airport. So a lot of your pilots have created the golf cart city. It was the first real golf cart city in Atlanta. That is literally probably 60 miles from where I live in the northern suburbs. So you don't want playing Peachtree City, because you're not going to make people happy. It's the drive time is just too much. So there's various challenges. And again, you look at the pros, I think here, their shelf life, if you get directors that are here for 10 years, it's a long time, because as you said, that you look at it and say, I need to make money, but directors here work too much on court, therefore their voice is heard too much, so their shelf life becomes shorter, and they don't see it until it's too late. And then the process starts all over again, where I've always been very cognizant, get me a couple other voices. I might make a little less in the short term, but I'm going to create enough programming and raise my levels of ancillary income levels on other things. Now, one thing that you said that scares the life out of me, you take upon the pro shop yourself. The club doesn't financially assist. You are responsible for all those decisions.
Hold on 1 second, because there's an insurance guy at my front door. He's checking the house. So 2 seconds, I'll be right back.
No
Keep
worries.
talking, but I'm going to come back and answer that question.
Very good. I look forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to hear his conversation about the pro shop, because you're either in Atlanta, you're either involved in it and you own it. So that was one of the conversations I had as director at where was that club in Duluth, the Berkeley Hills Country Club. Mm-hmm. When I was running that club, albeit briefly, it was okay. You slowly build your own pro shop,
right? And
you hang some things on the walls. But I noticed that Windermere doesn't have a pro shop where you can walk in and do some shopping, because Bobby Schindler wants nothing to do with that. But I know some guys, especially the golf guys, if they've owned a pro shop for 20 years, they never have to teach a golf lesson. They're just, Nike sells itself, that once you get into that. But they've built up that one pro shop. I can't imagine, Ed, and I'd love to hear how you handle this, to be able to have to build up a pro shop in March and then tear it down in August. And it's money.
A lot of work. It's a lot of work. Yeah, it's a lot of work. And what I found in the last couple of years is, there's a lot of theories. Do you do sales at the end, get rid of your inventory? I find that, as I said earlier, having a couple clubs, if you don't logo everything, you can, move them around. So if it didn't sell in one club, you can move it to another, and it doesn't become dead stock. Once you logo it, you're stuck, with the club. You're not going to be able to sell a club logo to another club. But so I've been taking it carefully with logos. So if something goes well, if a line goes well at one club, then I'll go and logo it for the next year, right? Because the lines tend to have the same design. And as you said so wisely, Bobby, is that, your key buyer is 35 to 45-year-old women, right? Yeah. They're the ones who really look at the fashions, A, for themselves, and B, for their kids. They look a lot for their kids.
Yes.
So we sell a lot of children's clothes. So I set up, what I also found in the last few years of doing the tennis shop is to have a tennis concierge. It makes a huge difference. I'm on the court, I might be on the court. I might be with a member. There's always a question. Hey, do you have this in large? Do you have this in small? Can you order it for me? Can you get it? How do I get a K-Swiss shoe tomorrow night? Those things, if you have someone in place that, I know that person costs you money, but boy, that in terms of member services, and they come back, they want more out of your shop. If I have like a Vineyard Vines, we do Vineyard Vines tote bags, and we do Vineyard Vines. I don't have it on today. I have an Ocean Reef shirt on today, Vineyard Vines, right? But I have vineyard vines for my club up in Marion, and they do a separate design just for us. Last year, it was called Summer of Soul Shine because we're coming out of COVID. We thought, and we did basically have a great summer. We call it Summer of Soul Shine. I had the whale in our club, and it said, Summer 2021 down the side. It's beautiful. I love those kinds of things. They bring in a club, so you can say that's a lost leader because people get very cohesive and they love being a member of something. And if they can show that club off through clothing, and that's where the logo becomes important, they'll buy it, right? But on the shop side, I'll be honest, this year in terms of sports rackets, it's really hard. I mean, I'm not telling any. I think Wilson just wrote a letter to most of the people saying they're not going to be able to supply tennis balls this summer.
Tennis balls, exactly.
Yeah, and I haven't seen a performance racket from Wilson. I'm a Wilson guy. I play with Wilson, but I can't get a blade. It's impossible.
I'll send you one.
Okay, thanks.
We'll send you one. We'll get you one.
No, all right. But yeah, I mean,
good. Sometimes it's who you know in that case, right?
Yeah, it is.
But you're right. I mean, it's a relationship that we cultivate and protect extraordinarily for that reason. Same thing down here, and I don't want to get off of you. I mean, literally, these guys down here are usually allocated about 100 cases a quarter, and our guy is telling us he has 100 cases for the year. Right. And so, if you're planning, you better have that in mind. We went to buy more, and the lady who purchases wanted to change credit cards, and the guy was like, don't do that because it's going to take longer to get you approved. You might lose your order. And we're like, holy cow. So it is crazy. But
cash flow is, cash flow. And Sean, you're right. I go to bed some nights nervous thinking of, oh God, I got that. I changed my ball supplier. So my tennis balls this year coming from Head Penn, which is new because I kind of saw the writing on the wall with Wilson.
We talked about that in January.
Yep. And I ordered the tennis balls back in January when we were talking, Sean, on the Institute of Directors luncheons. So we did that, but I've also ordered them to be delivered early, so it's hurting my cash flow because the balls are already in place. The courts aren't even open, and in 30 days I got to pay for the tennis balls. And I ordered basically for the whole summer. We go through, 180 cases in the summer. And I didn't want to be, I
understand,
left out in the cold.
At that point, it's one of our rules. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Yep.
And I'm learning in that case, and Bobby was talking the same thing. I went to him. I'm like, any chance you were ordering extra tennis balls that I can get in on that? And Bobby just kind of shaking his head like everybody's asking the same questions. Like we're just all just trying to figure out where to get tennis balls that isn't just retail with a maximum of one per customer.
And also the other problem we were having this year, we're experiencing, and I'm sure Atlanta, you guys have HOAs that do embroidery, but the embroidery time is out of control. So I just talked to a director who's opening up his club this week in New Canaan, Connecticut. He's a great friend of mine. And he just told me he's getting everything delivered non-embroidered, and he's going to take it to a local embroidery shop and just cross his fingers and hope they do a decent job. Because, in our business, most of the embroiderers are it's like 10 companies, and we all trust them. We know them. And if you go to a new supplier, you're like, because the clothing, is $25, $35 a piece wholesale.
Yeah, wholesale.
If the embroiderer messes it up, you're stuck, with a piece of, clothing you got to put out at 50% off.
And that's why we're amazed with you of taking on that pro shop. But I guess if you've got multiple pro shops, like you were saying, if it isn't all logoed, right? They can this didn't fly here. All right, let's try it over here. You've got kind of a rotating pro shop that you can move in and out, and you're also buying in bulk at a point of saving a little bit here, a couple of points here and there. But still, I mean, Bobby and I shake our heads like, unless we had the one place that I know I can be director of tennis for a contract of 5 to 10 years and I can settle in, because that's a long, in the Atlanta area, it's rare that we have the tennis director that owns the pro shop. It's very uncommon here as far as I know. And in that case, you need to be there a while. That isn't a thing that you come in seasonally and make a bunch of money, because that takes some time as an initial investment to really recoup that a couple of years of putting in to build up a pro shop. And you doing it seasonally, that our eyes get wide. And we just think about how terrifying, like you said, you struggle to sleep at night every once in a while. Bobby and I are thinking, we want no part of that.
I have a couple of benchmarks that I think about when I do the shop. One is, obviously outgoings at the front end, right? So we try to get the pro shop revenue about a third of the programming revenue. That's kind of a benchmark we look for. So if someone's thinking of opening up a shop, if you do $100,000 worth of encore programming, bank on 30,000 in your shop. All right. So so buy according to that. That's kind of where we're at. That's what we think. The other thing I'm finding, aside from the supply chain, is what we're trying to do. It sounds crazy, but is one delivery. You know, if you're going to 6 different clubs for deliveries, it like say I do one order for 6 clubs and it goes, what I try to do is do one delivery early. And then when I go to that club, take that delivery with me personally. Sounds crazy, but the delivery costs are, with gas prices, they're exorbitant. So we're trying to get that to one central warehouse delivery and then free delivery from there with staff or however we do it.
Listen, Tennis Warehouse agrees with you. They literally moved there. We have a Tennis Warehouse in Atlanta. Now, I mean, they're based out of California, but they moved here for the very reason it was cheaper for them to build an enormous structure to have a mirror of what they have in California here in Atlanta for shipping costs and to ship to Europe and to be able to distribute on the East Coast because it was just cheaper. So it is. The funny part is what you're saying, and this is where Atlanta is so different. The majority we have, besides Tennis Warehouse and the other online guys, there is one dominant pro shop, and it, because of Atlanta's prominence with tennis, has been able to survive, and that's Your Serve. So the irony is the big clubs that Sean spoke of, they're usually the ones, either Your Serve will be the de facto owner behind the scenes, which keeps them to be able to rotate inventory, or if the club actually takes on the pro shop. I was at White Columns Country Club, which was predominantly golf, but you could go up and use the pro shop and the get some tennis clothes if you needed it. Everything we sold was logoed because that's the majority of our inventory was sold to the Monday people who did outings. So even though we had a club, and the irony, everybody would come in 2 weeks before Christmas to get the discounted family gift, to the uncle that they haven't seen, but I'll give them something new from White Columns this year. So Atlanta is so different because of the dynamics that we're involved with all year round, with so much competition, with most places, even your embroidery. There's so many mom and pop little people that get involved because they play tennis, say, oh, I can do this. There's a need. People like embroidery. I use somebody that, my partner gives lessons to, has her own little cottage. It's not, this isn't good, the family income, but if she can make another $10,000 to $15,000 a year, it moves the household. Everybody lives a little bit better. So those are the things. And again, going back to, so I guess my next question for you is along the same lines where I think we are going to be a little different. How do you staff? Where do you go to look for staff, and how do you staff?
You're talking to teachers, instructors,
yes.
That's okay.
That's everybody's big question, because Bobby has the same thing. It's one of the reasons Bobby and I do business together is because I handle one of his staffing questions, and he doesn't have to worry about it. I handle the junior 10 and under beginners, and I can be his part-time staff. And in my business, it works. In his, he doesn't have to bring on somebody full. So all those questions of, okay, how do I scale when every single one of my pieces is part-time? And it seems like you get to do that every year, where we try to never do that. It's just so difficult here. So we're very curious about that.
Yeah, so it's a mix. And I will start this out on the tennis side, that I'm finding that, and I don't mean disrespect to anybody, but the USPTA and the PTR sites aren't being as responsive as we used to know them. And I know they've been taken over by 2 search firms, one search firm's PTR and one search firm. And I think more of that, many of us pros looking for jobs are seeing that as a collective data collection exercise rather than really promoting jobs. So I'm finding that I'm getting really good results on LinkedIn and Indeed. I know my colleague down at Ocean Reef who just retired, congrats, Jim Morton, but he put his jobs up on Indeed only, and he was getting good results. So, the biggest thing for me is word of mouth, getting out there every day, talking to the directors that in the industry. Hey, do you know anybody looking for a job? You know anybody that's good? And that's how, I got into the seasonal gig. I didn't even apply for a job. The Edgartown Yacht Club the gentleman up there, Paul Pertilli, great. One of my mentors called me. I didn't know who he was. And he said, Ed, you got the job. I said, what job? He said, I talked to two people. They both recommended you. You got it. I'm like, where? And I went. I was like, this is a great gig. So I took it. But I think word of mouth is a big one. Justin Campbell, I'm going to give him a shout out. He's a director up in New Jersey in Princeton at a club called Breedensbrook. And he did a fantastic thing. He went on Facebook. And this is another idea. And he put out like, hey, we're having trouble. He put it, I think, in the Facebook tennis coaches and news page. We're having trouble finding people. And I said, this is a great idea. He got like 34 applications, just people looking for work for the summer. And I've taken 3 of those. You find out different, you get their names, and then you go do a little digging. You find out that they know somebody that you know. So you call that person up and say, hey, did this person work well for you? Yeah, they work great. Great. Got it. And so I think word of mouth, but I'm staying away from the job boards from the industry, because I just don't think they're as responsive. People are hacking into them, as you know, like that pro tennis jobs, the minute it's up on USPTA, it's out on pro tennis jobs. So everybody knows those jobs now. And I think they're getting watered down. It's a process. Never burn a bridge. That's the other thing I'm going to say. Common sense isn't so common, but never burn a bridge is a commonsensical type of thing. You never know when that bridge is going to help you find a staff member. Always leave a former job on good terms, because they'll have somebody at that club or at that facility that is going to move or can't stay and is going to be looking for a job, and you get the call.
Yeah.
But, I can't help you any more than that.
That's kind of the question that we would say, all right, so if we pull all this together and say, okay, so how does Beyond the Baselines help Atlanta, and how does Atlanta help you? So in this case, we all get together and say, okay, I fit here. This is my piece. Bobby's doing this. This is his world. And from your point of view, Ed, in Atlanta, I don't know if there's a lot of interim GM or boutique hotel opportunities here. That's not a market research I've done, because it's just not my world. But in Atlanta, everything, like you said, it's full-time, not a lot of part-time back and forth. It's one of the reasons my niche works out well, being part-time to help you with, help Bobby with his club. But in your case, coming in, is there an Atlanta market? Who do you target beyond just going to monster.com and Indeed? And I just go on the USPTA site and look for myself. I'm a 20-year USPTA member, and I don't come up. So obviously their site needs some work. So we need to talk to USPTA. That's not helpful if I can't find myself, and I've paid my dues. This is sad. There's no Sean Boyce in the country. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm here because I'm me. But enough of my complaining of USTA. But to find those part-time people or those seasonal people, I'm wondering how much we can get together and help each other.
Well, I think the HOAs is where you start, because that's where, as you guys know, is really where the Atlanta league season really is, I think. And you start with those HOAs and you go in there. I know Play by Court, the guys that do the court reservation systems. They do a lot of HOAs in Florida, and they're kind of bonding together, these HOAs, to work with each other. Maybe that's something we could look at doing is consulting for the HOAs and making the overarching umbrella of HOA tennis better. What we are trying to avoid, Sean, and what you articulated so well on my podcast, is you want to avoid the guy with the basket of balls in his car trunk that doesn't know how to teach tennis. And so if you can, right, you said that.
Bobby and I have our different opinions on that. I'm like, I want that guy on the list. We need to be able to find him. And Bobby's like, no, that drives down prices.
But you want to avoid, what you want to do is say, hey, we can bring in, however we do it, and you're going to have to, we're going to have to figure out a way, bring in best in class teaching and programming. That's it. Best in class at HOA level, at club level, at boutique hotel level. But you've got to build it from scratch. So you're going to have to start with, one HOA. Get out there. I mean, I'd love to get one HOA in Atlanta, manage it, make it the spot to be, with great instructors, great programming, great music, good food.
What's the word?
Ice not around the corner, but at the facility.
Well, well, I think when you say HOA, what I think of is my neighborhood, which is not even going to hire. There's no hiring there. There's nobody coming in to run the club.
But don't you have bigger HOAs I know you do, like with 10, 12, 14 courts?
Well, but the funny part, what you said, and a light bulb just went off for me for what you said, because we have a bunch of, and I had one of them, and just probably still have it according to LinkedIn, but I don't really pursue that very much. Is the tennis? There are tennis management companies.
Right.
Listening to what you do is so far beyond what we're expected to do. My thought for what you would do is call the existing, not the facility themselves, like Windermere, which is where I'm at. It's a 10 court, really 12 court, 6 pickleball court facility managed by a management company. However, they had, and they don't even pay me, but I work with them. Obviously, I'm an independent contractor. I think that is who you should speak to. That
Right.
to me is the interesting play, not the individual subdivision. Go to the actual higher level, especially with what you offer and the expertise you have, which most of the, I mean, we always laugh jokingly that I'm a little bit more intelligent than some of the other guys in the business. So therefore I get a little longer look, but ultimately I'm still short of being able to, there's only so many hours in a week.
Right.
Where you have a staff and a knowledge already that I think could go in and speak to my management, the people that manage Windermere, and say, hey, look, you have this many facilities, especially what you're talking about, because this particular management company does a lot with senior facilities, which they're building 2 facilities within the circle of Metro Atlanta that are going to have more than 40 pickleball courts on property.
Well, Bobby, let's go at them together, because that's the way. I think you've got it right there.
Yeah.
And I did that in South Florida. I ended up working with a management of HOA, property managers,
Right.
whatever they're called, CCMs or whatever, but property management companies, and they go and they manage like 30 companies.
Yes.
But they don't know what they're doing with racket sports. That's right. And there is a niche there that we can find. So let's get on them.
Yeah,
I'm always up for doing something new.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, I think that's an interesting pitch to make, because as you said, and I saw your certification, that the country club management certification is, as I told Sean, I said, no, he's not, he's more than a tennis, because you need that to manage white columns. And as Sean said, that's why tennis guys don't get it. There'll be a master tennis professional, or, I always have a master's degree in sports marketing, and I'd have to remind my people that but my stuff was mostly tour management, sponsorship, sales. So my skill set isn't necessarily that, because in Atlanta, more than anything, the director at that is a politician. He shakes a lot of hands. He solves a lot of problems internally, because leagues are taken care of. Not only do we have Alta, we have USTA trying, filling the gap. Then we have an independent league called T2, which is the largest flexible play league in the country. And really, he's only been able to establish himself in 2 other cities on a minor level, but he's a multimillionaire because of Atlanta, what he was able to accomplish in Atlanta, taking the idea of, I'm starting with 80. So if I ever get 10%, I'm rolling, and, forget about what he's actually accomplished. So,
Hey.
and to me, the only real successful tennis business that I've seen through all the years.
Well, let me ask you a question about the HOA. So, like,
Sure.
if we did this, here's a question for you. You've got all those leagues out there, right?
Yes.
Do the HOA residents ever complain that it's always league play? I mean, that they can't get on a court? Because that's what I found when I ran an HOA down in Florida, that a lot of the residents were like, hey, what's this with these ladies' teams? I can't get on a court between 10 and 12. Come on. And do you ever have,
most people here aren't fighting over 10 to 12.
Well, not
especially on a Thursday. We just know you're not getting a court. And Bobby has to tell members all the time, don't call me for a court between 9 and 11 a.m. on a Thursday. Just don't.
But I think that also it speaks to the volume of the culture, how it's already established here. Listen, you can go to any club in Atlanta, and I promise you, it'll be dead from 12:30 to 4:30. Absolutely.
And around the country, that's the case, isn't it? Unfortunately.
Yes. And I get it, especially here during the summer, but when the people are going to play, and there's so much, and this is why I think that what excites me about pickleball, Atlanta tennis is an amenity. It's not, you've said it early on that you run it like a business. Well, in Atlanta, you really don't have to. There's just so much.
So free.
It's so free that it's tough to monetize. It's why you get all these mom and pop industries that pop up and say, we're going to fill that void. And then they get into and say, but it's not scalable. Even, I've worked with so many, I don't even remember the one you said. We have Reserve My Court in Atlanta, which is a local guy that he established a lower paying niche. So he has about 500 to 600 team, which sounds great on paper, but when you're paying $25 a court and he caps it off at 6 courts for the year, you sit there and go, his gross revenue for the year is $90,000, and him growing actually hurts him because he's got to get a bigger server. So he's eating into his profits. So how do I scale? Well, then we met Courts, KORURTIS.com.
Yeah.
And, he's had some money, and you're like, okay, this first guy who's funded, that didn't last. We have, who's this we spoke to in North Carolina, Sean?
Court Reserve.
Court Reserve. Very similar to Courts. Did you guys ever speak to each other and say, we're probably better together than we are everybody scrambling for this carcass? And I don't know if the folks you mentioned, because there's another couple of guys that are out of Georgia Tech that started something, again, very similar, and they have 100 facilities around, and they're, that's good enough because it's not their full-time job, but it eats into
their full-time job.
And it eats into the company that could make a difference in tennis, but everybody's fighting for this carcass,
and that's a new project that we're working on, and we want to make sure you're a part of it, Ed, as well. As we've got a new project coming out that's going to try to create some cohesion, that is going to create cohesion in Atlanta, where the other cities this company does this company does that. That's the end of the conversation. Here, everybody's got their little tiny piece of the pie, and it's really difficult to get everybody on the same page. Hey, let's all be friends here. This isn't a zero-sum game, and let's get it together and help each other do things. And I think that's where the connectivity is going to come in and say, okay, well, you do this. I don't have to fight you for your piece. I'm going to do this part. You do that part. Or let's get everybody together and figure out the best way to do these things.
Well, Sean, you had gotten up for a second. I said you had gotten up, and Ed said the magic word while you were up. And I laughed. Ed didn't know why. He said, oh, I kind of act as a tennis concierge.
Concierge service, concierge. Exactly.
Well, that's what we're trying to do. I mean,
that's a great idea, because that's where, you can have, tennis is going to be tennis, right? It's how you serve your customers that gets them back.
Yes.
Right. You can be a great teacher. There are great teachers everywhere, but there aren't great tennis concierges everywhere. Yeah. And that's the difference. And you said it earlier, Bobby. You said, you can have I call them a court guy or a court gal.
Yes.
Like, they're great in the cage, but they're not great behind the front desk administrating and as you said, being a politician.
Yes.
It's important. That's the important part of the job that so many, and somebody, I forget who it was, Andy Zoden said to me, he said, Ed, a great player is always about him or herself. And it's really hard for that great player to become a concierge, because
Absolutely.
They're not used to providing service. They get the service.
Tennis is inherently an individual
sport,
and it does. You're right. And it's funny because this is the big, and it goes back to, we won't speak poorly of our governing organizations and such unless we want to. Is the funny part to us, the failing comes from the top, is that the mission statement, the message that is being given doesn't support that. It's what gets hired in Atlanta. We laugh. You see the pros when it used to be, they would post in their neighborhood for, I was number one in Georgia. And we look at it, how many number ones could have played in Georgia at this? And everybody talks about their playing ability. And guys, Nick Bollettieri didn't play. Bill Belichick played lacrosse. That's the problem with tennis. We get so single-minded in purpose that, I want a great player. Yes, it has a role. You got to look the part. But most people are never going to hit with a top 100 person. Therefore, to be the greatest tennis player ever doesn't work. And it also hurts the whole business that we've created this narrative that you can only get better by playing with better players. Well, how does Novak get better? How does Rafa get better? How does Roger get better if there's only 3 people they can hit with and they live in different countries? That's a problem. And these are all things that are systemic to our industry. And I think it stems from the top, unfortunately, the inability to focus and say, this is what our message is. This is what our mission statement is. and it's created a very all over the place industry.
You gave me a great plug, so I have to leave it sometime soon. But you gave me a great plug, and I love chatting with you guys. We could do this every day. That's why I founded Beyond the Baselines. I would go to job interviews when I gave up the advertising business in Europe and moved home. I started interviewing for tennis positions, right? Directors of tennis, head pro positions, and I'd meet with the executive committee or the search committee. And they wanted to know my playing background. And I turned to them very openly and I said, why does that matter?
Yeah.
I said, I can play with anybody. I can hit with a 5-0. I can play with an ATP tour. He'll make me look good, or she'll make me look good. But that doesn't matter. Right. I turned to the people and I said, let me show you how good I am at spreadsheets. Well, what do you need spreadsheets for? I was like, how are you going to budget the clothing lines? How are you going to budget the ball purchases? How are you going to budget how are you going to budget the liability policies? I can't
do that with my forehand.
Yeah. And I can't do it when I'm on the court that much. I'm going to hire people to teach tennis because they're better at it than I am. And that's why I founded the company, because I was like, this is crazy. They're looking at playing levels and they need to be looking at business acumen.
Yes. I like that. And you figured that out, and that's good. And I think Ed just said, we got to shut it down soon. We're coming to the end, and I'm sure we could talk for hours. I have that one question. We have that one question that we like to ask everybody that we sent you ahead of time, and we say, okay, so if you were, with your experience, with your view, your specific point of view, just as if you were king of tennis, is there one thing, or is there something you would change? Is there something you would do as king of tennis and you could just magically make something happen? Is there something that you would share with us that you would change or adapt or install in our current version
you sent
of
me
what
this
we've got as tennis?
And I thought of it, and it's come to me. It's like, as we've talked, but you use the word cohesion. And if tennis was cohesive as an industry, and I think it starts way back. If I were king of tennis, I would make it so that juniors wouldn't cheat. If they cheated, because that's where we start with the bad cohesiveness, is junior tennis. And I watch it firsthand with my daughter, who's 13 and is looking at her UTR every day. But I go to those tournaments and it is so uncohesive, if that's a word. The parents are all rooting against the other kids or rooting against the parents. I hand my hand up. I got yelled at by, clapping a double fault. If we could all become cohesive, we'd have a much better industry, and we'd have a much better standard of practice in that industry. And believe it or not, I think we'd have much better players going out on the world tour. But it starts with the juniors. If I were king, and I love what you do, Sean, with those kids. If I were king for a day, I'd make King Richard, I'd make my kids, all of them, including my own, the greatest etiquette on the court. And that would bring in a cohesive feel to the sport as they got older. We don't have that, and I miss it. I think other sports do have it, and tennis doesn't, unfortunately. And I think it hurts us as we move forward.
I'm gonna quote you, and I'll give you credit, of course, but that you just gave me my next article. Is writing about that for the parents to say, you know what, this is what we teach at Tennis for Children, and we teach them to not cheat is a strange way to say it, but we teach them the etiquette of this is how it works at this age, and here's why we do it, and here's why it matters. It goes in with one of my other rules. With my wife and I have all these rules. One of the other ones, rule number 7, is only speak truth. And cheating tears at the fabric of what tennis really is, and it means winning is more important than doing the right thing, and that is what we install at that level. So we will. I'll get together with you offline.
I can give you a headline, Sean. I'll give you a headline.
What you got?
It used to be called the gentleman sport. Now it should be called the gentle person sport.
Oh, there you go. Thank
in our era, and it used to be a gentleman sport. Now it's got to be cohesive with everybody, and it's got to be the gentle person sport.
All right, working title. There we go.
And you're right. Gentle, I mean, that was such a great part of tennis, was the idea of tennis etiquette. And as you said, it you don't realize the ramifications. We work with one of the local high school teams, and it amazes me. First of all, nobody talks about tennis etiquette anymore. I mean, that was part of the game, the little nuances associated, not just not cheating. Now it's the old, if it's close, you call it out. Where when I was growing up, if you are remotely not sure, it is good. You never call something out unless you're absolutely positive. And then you watch these kids, they can't even warm up together because they're so trained to win. And I'm like, guys, we're trying to get 100 in a row here. That person on the other side is not your competitor. That is your partner. And as long as you're hitting the ball 2 inches from the baseline or trying to hit the ball there, you're never going to get to 100. And they just don't get it. And it's part of, from the moment they walk on the court, hit it big, hit it hard, hit it hard. No, there's a way to play this game. And unfortunately, we've given it up. And I think, like you said, it cost us players. It cost us players. It cost us. Would pickleball exist if tennis did their job?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Probably not.
Would padel exist if tennis did their job? Now, padel is pretty young. It's pretty off the wall. It's pretty cool. So it's a little bit different player. But all these ancillary things that have popped up, as I say about Alta, if Alta did their job and listened to people about flexibility, would T2 exist? Probably not. So like I'm with Sean. I think this is a 2-3 lifetime parter. You share a lot of our values, a lot of our thoughts. I think we came up with something, an interesting way to approach it. Just out of the karma factor, you live in Vero. I have family and friends in Melbourne and Jupiter. My buddy is the head tennis coach at Princeton, and I went to school at TCU, and you mentioned Dallas, so I know all those clubs as well. So I was like, oh, wow. And by the way, I was born in New York. So yeah.
I just talked to the Princeton coach a couple months ago.
Billy Pate, great guy.
Yeah.
Talk to Billy.
I was trying to find staffing. I was trying to find a staff member.
Good luck. What will Billy tell you is that they're all going to be on Wall Street. Forget about his team. Now, you might want to see if they have a club team. I'm with you. But absolutely. And I was going to ask you real quick.
We got a couple of players from him, but go ahead. Go ahead.
No, have you spoken to the lady who's running the new program at University of Florida, the master's program?
No, I have not. I need.
And she's a pretty good lady, and I thought that might be an internship. If you could do it where they get on the right, where that's required to go work with you during the summer.
Yep.
And plus you're a
great
little safer
experience
for
as
you.
part of that master's program, like Bobby was saying, program, or the PTM programs to say.
PTM programs, I've hit up on the PTM programs. They're great. Yeah. Yep.
This one is actually getting an older kid too, so a little less scary for you. Whether a 19-year-old's going to go out the night before, these guys could be 22 to 25. So going back, realizing corporate America didn't work. And I hooked her up. We'll exchange some names.
That'd be great.
Like we'll go back and do this. And we definitely want you to come through here in Atlanta. And let's break some bread.
I'll stop in on the way up. I'm gonna have a car full. I just lived out of my car for like a week as I head up, so that'll be fun. I'll meet you guys.
Very good.
I like it. That's good.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I appreciate the time. I will. We'll make sure we're in touch and definitely doing it again. Like Bobby said, it's a multiple parter. The fun thing about these conversations is we mention things and we're all taking notes and writing things down. Oh, we got to do that. Or for me, it's like the article. All right, here's your homework. I want your quote about cohesion and no cheating in the juniors, and we'll put that all together. And we start creating that cohesion. We start creating that friendship and getting everybody together and saying, hey, this isn't a zero-sum game. Let's do what's best for the industry, for everybody. Getting hopefully some Americans in the top 10 at some point, and maybe one of them will come out of Tennis for Children. Maybe one of them will come out of one of Ed's clubs, the kid that plays every day for 8 weeks straight, and that's all he plays. And all of a sudden we realize it's the next great player. Maybe your daughter is it, right, Ed?
Hey, we've got women in the top 10. We just need some men in the top 10.
Exactly.
Yes.
You're right. Exactly. Well, we will follow up. Ed, I appreciate your time. Bobby, as always.
Well, thank you for inviting me on the podcast. It's been a real true pleasure to meet you guys, and I'm looking forward to working together.
Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you.
You too.
Ed.
Take care. Thank you.
Now.
Bye.
All right, I can pause. That's good. Oh, Ed actually hung up. That's good.
Oh, cool.
11:05. I got to get Jovi to the orthodontist, so I am out. And I want to talk. Do you have a few more minutes? Can I call you from the car?
Yeah, we're going to start making breakfast, but I'm here until 3:30.
Okay.
I mean that's interesting. I mean,
like I said, let me call you